Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2023 action film, The Collective. The film is directed by Tom DiNucci and it stars Lucas Till, Ruby Rose, Don Johnson, Mercedes Varnado, otherwise known as Sasha Banks, and Tyrese Gibson. Now, the film follows a familiar tale. There is like a secret spy organisation called The Collective, and Lucas Till's character Sam at the beginning of the film is being tested and recruited into The Collective. And then once he's in The Collective, he's kind of put to work, and there is like a vicious human trafficker called Miro who has exposed many of the agents within The Collective, so they are essentially put at risk. And because Lucas Till's character Sam is new to the organisation, he's not even in the system yet. He is sent to support Tyrese Gibson's character Hugo in order to try and take down this vicious human trafficker. As you can imagine, things don't exactly go according to plan. Right, what are my thoughts on The Collective? Well, I'm going to be quite brutally honest here, guys. I think this film is pretty dull, predictable, forgettable, a real lack of creativity, generic. I mean, there's not a huge amount of positives I can give you in regards to this film because there's not a lot that this film offers that you haven't seen before, done many times before, and done much better. Even films with a similar budget to this, because this is obviously made for direct-to-DVD, direct-to-streaming. So there is, a level of budget here, obviously. It's not a AAA film by any stretch of the imagination, even though there are quite a few familiar faces here that many of you will recognise. Lucas Till, you may recognise. He was in the X-Men films. I can't remember who played now. Was it Angel or something like that? The one with the wings. We've got Ruby Rose here. Now, if you watch my content and you're familiar with my content, and I'm not generally impressed with Ruby Rose and her acting prowess, and especially when she's doing action films. Thankfully, she has a fairly small role here. They're not trying to sell her as like this badass trying to, beat up rooms full of people, 3 times her size. We've got Don Johnson, who plays essentially like the leader and recruiter for The Collective. His role is essentially a cameo, but he is in it a decent amount, I suppose. Mercedes Varnado, who used to be Sasha Banks in the WWE. I think this is her film debut. She plays like the character that Ruby Rose normally plays. She plays like the female badass, assassin sort of thing. And she does okay, I guess, for a first role. But to me, while none of these performers bring in a great deal of charisma or anything interesting to the film or their parts, the one that for me just totally dragged down the film was Tyrese Gibson as Hugo. Now, I know Tyrese Gibson, to many, will be more recognisable, obviously, from his Fast and the Furious appearances. I'm not a big fan of the Fast and Furious films. It's nothing to do with Tyrese. I'm just, I suppose there could be the brainless fun, I suppose, harmless fun. I'm just not a huge fan of them. But his performance here in this film is lacking charisma, doesn't do it justice. He delivers his lines terribly. Real lack of interest, no effort put into the physicality of the role. He's supposed to be like the veteran from The Collective. And there's a scene where he's taking down a house full of bad guys. And it's probably not all his fault because the choreography is pretty terrible. But he's about as believable as Superman, if you like. The way he portrays his physicality in the role and then his line delivery. It's just, for me, it's a really terrible and lazy performance by Tyrese Gibson. That's just my opinion anyway, but nobody really can walk out of this film with their head held what you would describe as high, because the film is just essentially as dull as dishwater for the most part. We've seen films like this done time and time again, raw recruits being recruited into secret organisations. Obviously, you got Kingsman, you got American Assassin that came out a few years ago that I thought was pretty decent, but it's done over and over and over again, and it seems like it just gets diluted each time, and it just feels so generic now and so overdone in this genre. To me, it's got to be something special to stand out because it's just been done so often before, and this film doesn't do any of it. I suppose the biggest compliment I can give this film is it's made competently, in a sense of, um, it looks decent. The editing's fine, the music's fine. It looks fairly, glossy and shiny and decent production values to it, despite its obviously lack of budget when you compare it to bigger films. Some of the action scenes, of a decent quality, but for the most part, the action scenes are really quite dull. And I think the problem is with a film like this, because it doesn't stand out, it just feels like you've seen it all before, and there's nothing here special at all. I mean, they try and throw in a pantomime villain. It just that just doesn't work. You know what I mean? This human trafficker. I mean, essentially what he does is, he kind of grabs people and then sells them on as slaves, basically. And this one person that he's got locked in a cage for the majority of the film, the whistleblower they call him, is the one that everybody wants, including the collective, because he's the one who's got all the information on the collective and stuff. It's just the way the film is kind of executed. It feels like this guy, this Miro character, the main villain here, he's supposed to be like this hugely powerful person, but he spends all his time in warehouses, you know what I mean, and drinking scotch or whatever it is, dancing around trying to be a pantomime villain. It just doesn't work for the film, in my opinion. And then there's a death scene here of a character that quite definitively, it would seem, is killed. And then they turn up later in the film, and they're absolutely fine. They don't even appear to be wounded. And you're just kind of like, hang on a minute, really? And it's not even a character I personally wanted to see come back, because I thought they were pretty terrible in the film. So from my perspective, this film is probably a washout. I can't really recommend an awful lot about it. I just really found it quite dull. It's not even one of those action films you can click your brain off and enjoy just for action's sake. A lot of action films, we can do that. They don't have to make sense. They don't have to be intelligent. If they're entertaining, especially the action, I'll forgive a lot. But this film isn't entertaining. There's not even any real attempts at humour here, and what attempts are at humour just completely fall flat. So yeah, definitely I would suggest this is one to avoid, guys. It is not very good at all. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.